Tonight we're going to be looking at chapter 17 in the book of Revelation. Let me pull up the roadmap that we're using, the chart that we're using. We use this in the class. It's a roadmap, kind of tells us where we're going in the book. By the way, this roadmap that we have been using throughout this class, these charts we've been using throughout this class, come straight out of Robert Harpwriter's workbook on the book of Revelation. That book forms the structure for this class, and it has formed the source for these charts as well. I may have made some modifications here and there, but other than that, it is by and large, 99% it is straight out of that workbook. Tonight we are in chapter 17. Chapter 17 and 18 all the way into chapter 19 and verse 10 form the section that's called the Fall of Babylon, the Harlot. To put this in the overall perspective of this chapter that we're in is that we are in the second half of the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation, as you've heard me say multiple times before, divides very nicely into two halves. Chapters 1 through 11 are the first half of the book. Chapters 12 through 22 are the second half of the book. Both halves of the book tell the exact same story. The only difference is that one tells it from the earthly perspective, and the second half tells it from this perspective of the deeper spiritual background. Remember, we started this section with that picture from the Wizard of Oz, where Toto is pulling back the curtain so that you can see the real Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. That's what's going on here in the second half of the book of Revelation. God is pulling back that curtain so we can see what's really going on behind the scenes. But the two halves of the book of Revelation tell the exact same story. There will, of course, be some details that are different, some that are added in one, not in the other, and maybe vice versa. But the overall story is the same. It's really, really easy to lose sight of that when we study the book of Revelation. And so we think that we're going all the way through, and we don't know how it is that we finish in chapter 11, and now it's almost as if we're starting over again in chapter 12. It is because we're starting over again, because the story starts over again. And so tonight, and also Sunday night, we're going to be looking primarily at this fall of Babylon, the harlot. So let's go ahead and get into this, chapter 17. I have to tell you, a lot of people find chapter 16 to be difficult with the Battle of Armageddon, probably because there's been so much written about that, especially in the modern age. So much has been written about that is not in accordance with what the Bible teaches. But the tendency is to think that chapter 16 is the hard chapter. Chapter 16 is actually pretty easy compared to chapter 17. Now, chapter 17, and what I mean by that is that this chapter that we're looking at this evening can be difficult and confusing, okay? I need to say that right up front. I need to say that not only for your benefit, I have to remind myself for my own benefit, because it is a difficult and confusing chapter. But having said that, I want to put that statement in perspective. It's difficult and confusing because this chapter mixes a lot of different symbols. So there's a lot of different symbolic things that are going on here. They get mixed together, and sometimes we kind of get lost in that. What I'm going to encourage you this evening to not do is don't lose sight of the forest because of the trees. Okay? Sometimes I think the saying is flip-flop, that you can't see the forest because of the trees. We don't need to lose sight of the forest because of the trees, okay? The trees are all the little details and symbols that are found in the chapter. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in trying to figure out what that's all about that we forget what the overall theme is and what the overall teaching of this part of the story is. So that's something that we need to do. We need to remember that the overall theme of chapter 17 is just like the overall theme of the entire book, but here it's in a microcosm, if you will. The overall theme is the defeat of this power, and it is Rome in the book of Revelation. So the defeat of Rome, this power that is waging war on God's people. And so when we get into all of these symbols that are going on and all these texts and what they're saying, and if we get a little confused about all of that, let me tell you, rest assured, your preacher, this teacher, okay, if you're not at Beach, I'm obviously not your preacher, this teacher sometimes gets a little confused in this chapter as well. I hope that I won't do that in the course of this class. But when we do that, when we get a little confused, we get a little lost, we need to remember that the overall theme of this chapter is about the power that is waging war on God's people and its defeat. All right, so having said all that, I forgot to say at the beginning of the class that I am watching the Facebook Live on my iPad. So if you have some questions that you'd like to see addressed, all you have to do is type those in the comment section. I'm looking down there from time to time. I'll see that, and I will try to address that here in the class. Okay? So, well, let's go ahead and get into the chapter then. Chapter 17. We have in chapter 17 first, under discussion, we have the great prostitute. So, actually what I want us to do is I want us to read all of chapter 17. It's all 18 verses, and then we're going to kind of break this apart and look at it piece by piece. So chapter 17, starting in verse 1, Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7th, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. The angel said to me, The waters that you saw, where the prostitute is seated, are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked, and devour her flesh, and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind, and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. All right, so that's chapter 17, and I think if you were following along with me as we read that out loud, if you got a little lost in the middle of that, well, it's because we got a little lost in that forest looking at this tree or that tree. It is a fairly confusing chapter because of all the elements that are going on here. They seem to be, to our eyes at any rate, they seem to be jumbled together in there. So let's see if in the course of this class we can kind of figure out what's going on in the chapter. So we have, first of all, the great prostitute, okay? We are told in verse 1 of chapter 17 that she is seated on many waters. And then we're told in verse 5 that those waters are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. So what we see here is this prostitute seated on many peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. This is somebody, something that has dominion over a large swath of humanity. Okay? And as we get to the point of understanding who the prostitute is, we'll understand how that is and why that is. So she's seated on many waters. Verse 5 explains to us what those waters are. Her clothing is described as purple, scarlet, gold, jewels, and pearls. That's in verse 4. All of this description of her clothing is a description of her wealth and her power. Probably clothing does not have that significance to as great an extent in our society as it did in that society, unless maybe it's the Academy Awards, where everybody seems to be outdoing themselves as to the outlandishness of what they're going to wear. But in the ancient world, what a person wore marked their position in society. And so when we read here about purple and scarlet, those were colors that were reserved to the wealthy elite in the Roman Empire. Gold and jewels and pearls, obviously that marked wealth. The common people simply didn't have access to that kind of wealth. And in the ancient world, with wealth came power. They went hand in hand. The truth of the matter is, the modern world isn't any different. Let's just face it. With wealth, even today, comes power. So we see this great prostitute seated on these many waters, and she is clothed in a way that indicates very clearly the wealth and power that she has. In verse 2, we read about her prostitution. She committed fornication with the kings of the earth, okay? So we've got a prostitute here, seated on many peoples, multitudes, languages, and nations. She's clothed in wealth and power. She commits her prostitution, her fornication, with the kings of the earth. Let's look on. Then in verse 5, we have this description of her. Did I mean verse 15? Anna asks. Yes, I did. There is a typo in my slide. Thank you, Anna, for pointing that out. It's not verse 5, it's verse 15. So if you're wondering why in the world I'm talking about 5, I left out a 1. It's verse 15, not verse 5. All right, so let's continue on here. Thank you, Anna, for pointing that out. So looking on here, as we look at the great prostitute, she has a name that's written on her forehead. The name that's written on her forehead is Babylon the Great. Now remember, in the book of Revelation, we have references over and over to Babylon. It isn't talking about literal Babylon. It's talking about Rome. But figuratively, she is called Babylon. Figuratively, she was also called Jerusalem. Okay? So Babylon here is a symbolic name. It is meant to remind the people, the readers, of what this prostitute is like. She is like Babylon of old. Okay? This great prostitute is then drunk with the blood of the saints, the martyrs of Jesus. So here we have this picture of this prostitute. Okay, she's got wealth, she's got power, she's seated on many nations and water and languages and nations and peoples. She's got this name on her forehead, and now we see her drunk, but not with wine, not with alcohol, but drunk with the blood of the saints, the martyrs, Christians who have been persecuted and have died. So this picture, as we're laying all this out, as the text lays this all out, this is not a pleasant picture, okay? This isn't a picture of a beautiful woman that's dressed very nicely. This is a picture of horror. This is a disgusting picture. And in fact, the text says that over and over, that describes her in a way that is meant to recall in the readers a feeling of disgust at seeing her. We also read in verse 9 that she is seated on 7 mountains. All right, so drawing all this together, what is the prostitute? Who does she represent? I would suggest to you that she clearly represents Rome itself. I mean by that the city of Rome, okay? Represents the city of Rome itself, capital of the vast Roman Empire. So the prostitute here in the text represents the city of Rome. She is seated upon a scarlet beast. We're going to come back to that in just a moment and talk about that more. So what we have here is this picture of a drunken prostitute dressed in wealthy clothing, dressed with gold and pearls, and she is drunk with the blood of the saints. And so maybe you can picture her kind of staggering and swaying, perhaps. The text doesn't say that. I'm just filling that in to get into your mind's eye. It does say she's drunk. We know what a drunk person looks like. And she is seated on this scarlet beast. So this is another one, this pair, if you will, is another one of these incredible characters that we see in the book of Revelation. All right, so when we talk about this, of course, in the context, it would be clear that it's talking about the city of Rome, but we get these tidbits here that help us to understand that. She's seated on 7 mountains. She's seated on many waters, okay? Let me pull up just a map. Maybe not all of us have heard about this, but the city of Rome was established and founded on 7 hills. This was well known in the ancient world. And if you look there on the map, let me pull up something and maybe I can get some just highlighting on those spots. So the 7 hills, we have one up here, the Quirinal. We have the Viminal over here, the Esquiline, the Caelian, the Aventine Hill, the Palatine Hill, and the Capitoline Hill. Perhaps if anything's familiar to us, it would be the Capitoline and the Palatine, but in fact there are 7 hills that were within the walls of Rome. And during the reign of Domitian, of course Domitian is the emperor in the days that Revelation is written, during his reign, they actually had a festival in the city of Rome. It was called the Septimontium. It was the festival of the 7 hills. And it was celebrated to celebrate those 7 hills. So the people of Rome were kind of proud of the fact that their city was built on these 7 hills. And it was known in the ancient world. In fact, it was so known that Vespasian actually issued a coin. This coin was minted in 71 AD, so about 25 years before the book of Revelation. This was a coin that depicted 2 things, well, really 3 things, if you will, that are part of the iconology or iconography of the city of Rome. First of all, we have the goddess, okay? The city of Rome was deified as a goddess, so there she is. She is seated on this coin on 7 hills. Now, this coin has been worn a little bit, so you're going to have, I don't want to say you're going to have to trust me, you're going to have to trust me a little bit. But there is the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the 7th. So there are 7 hills. She is seated on 7 hills. And then finally, the last thing here at the bottom, we have the she-wolf that nursed Romulus and Remus, those twins that date way back to the beginning of the city of Rome. And so this coin that Vespasian minted actually shows these symbols of the city of Rome. Rome is a goddess, Rome sitting on 7 hills, and of course the she-wolf there with Romulus and Remus. And so I bring that coin out because I want us to understand that in the book of Revelation, when the prostitute is described as sitting on 7 hills, it would have been immediately clear to every reader of the book of Revelation exactly who the prostitute was. It was the city of Rome. Okay? The city itself is being depicted here in the text as a prostitute. I think it's also interesting that in the book of Revelation, she is depicted as a she, because that's exactly how the Romans themselves depicted their own city. They deified the city itself. They called it a goddess, and the goddess's name was Roma. Of course, the city's name was Roma as well. Okay, if you go to Italy today, the city is still called Roma in Italian. So this coin depicts very well what people thought of in the city of Rome in the ancient world, and it's pulled out here in the book of Revelation. So to first readers, there would not have been any doubt at all that this is talking about the city. This is not Stephen Baxley making this up. It's not Robert Harkrider making this up or some other person who wrote a commentary. This is truly what first century Christians would have associated with these words. All right, so that's the prostitute. We also have the beast under discussion as well. So let me go ahead and pull up the next slide here. Now let's talk a little bit about the beast. So the beast here, what is the beast? If the prostitute is the city of Rome, then what is the beast that she's seeing? That she is seated on? I'm sorry. I would suggest to you that the scarlet beast here represents the Roman Empire. All right, I'm going to pull up a chart, and we're going to pull this up all at once, and then we're going to talk about it. Let's go back to chapter 13. Go ahead and open your Bibles and go back to Revelation chapter 13. We'll come back to 17 in just a minute. But I want us to read chapter 13, and I want us to read the first 7 verses, because there is a sea beast that is described in that chapter. Okay? And I saw a beast, this is chapter 13, verse 1, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea. So there's our first point of comparison there. The sea beast rises out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. So we get 7 heads and 10 horns. Then we get blasphemous names that are written on its heads. Okay? Verse 2. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it, the dragon gave its power and his throne and great authority. The correspondence there is back to the book of Daniel, verse 3. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, For he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. We can continue on reading, but we're not going to. Notice the things here that we have. Comes out of the sea, has 7 heads and 10 horns. Blasphemous names are written on its heads. It makes war with the saints, or war against the saints in verse 7. It has a mortal wound that is healed, and all the world marvels at this sea beast. Well, then when you look in chapter 17, what do we find? We find that this beast doesn't come out of the sea, but it comes out of the bottomless pit. That's in verse 8. It also has 7 heads and 10 horns. That's in verse 3. Also, it has these blasphemous names. That's in verse 3 as well. In verse 14 here of chapter 17, it wages war with the Lamb. Okay? There's all of these points of correspondence between these two beasts. In verse 8, we read that it was, is not, and is to come. I would suggest to you that that corresponds to that mortal wound that's healed. It looks like it's gone, looks like it's destroyed, back it comes. Verse 8 of chapter 17, how do people react to the scarlet beast? People will marvel. So what's going on here? In chapter 13, we have the sea beast. Remember, in chapter 13, we have, or in that area, not just in chapter 13, but in that part of the book of Revelation, we have 3 characters. We have the earth beast, we have the sea beast, and we have the dragon. We have political power, religious power, and Satan. Here when we get to chapter 17, we get the scarlet beast with the prostitute. The picture, what's being pictured here, it's focusing in really on that sea beast and what that represented. So the prostitute represents the city of Rome. The beast represents the empire. She is seated on the beast. They go hand in hand. But clearly, the one who is on the beast is the one steering the beast. It's Rome, the city of Rome, the government that is seated at Rome, that is calling the shots for the Roman Empire. But it's the beast then, along with the city, that wage war against God's people. So the prostitute is pictured as being drunk with the blood of the saints. Okay, so that's the imagery that's going on here. It's a slight it's a variation or a nuance of what we saw in chapter 13. It's really kind of a focus on part of it and an expansion of part of it as well. Let's continue on. Again, we don't want to lose sight of the forest because of the trees. Okay, so let's continue on here. If I get my slide to advance, we will. Very good. Let me go back to chapter 17. In my Bible, you might want to do the same, just to have it open there with you. So, 17, let's drop down to verses 9 and 10 here. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Okay, so the beast has 7 heads. It tells us that those 7 heads represent the 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They also represent, the text tells us, verse 10, they are also 7 kings. 5 of whom have fallen, 1 is, the other has not come. When he does come, he must remain only a little while. So what is going on with the 7 heads, the 7 mountains, and the 7 kings? Clearly, there were a literal 7 mountains, okay? And that we saw that on the coin and how that would bring to mind who the prostitute is. But there's a symbolic meaning to that 7 as well, okay? So we get the 7 heads and we get 7 kings. Well, there's a lot of disagreement as to what this section means. I'm going to give you my take on it, and I'm going to give you another possible way of viewing this. There are others out there that we won't go into here in the class. First of all, I will give you my take on it, and that is that Rome is the current occupant, and we're talking about these 7 kings here. Rome is the current occupant of a long list of earthly kingdoms that have warred against God's people, okay? So when you take biblical history and you look at kingdoms and empires that have waged war against God's people, indeed we can find very easily, and we're not stretching history here to do this, 7 kingdoms, okay, or empires. We start out with Egypt. That goes all the way back to the book of Exodus. And since there are so many references to the book of Exodus here in the book of Revelation, we talk about all those plagues that are going on, it is not at all a far stretch to start our list here with Egypt. So we have Egypt. Following Egypt, we have Assyria. Following Assyria, we have Babylon. Following Babylon, we have Persia. Those are all in the biblical period. So we read about all those nations in the Old Testament. Following Persia, then there was Greece. That's in the intertestamental period. Those are 5 that have fallen. Then there is the one that is. That would be Rome. And then we find the 7th one. That would be a reference to all future kingdoms with the phrase has yet to come. Now, this is, if you go to Robert Harkrider's workbook and look at his explanation here, his explanation is different. This is not his explanation. This is how I understand the text. I, Stephen Baxley. Okay? Let me give you another way of viewing this. Another way of viewing the 7 is to take it as a symbolic reference. We have seen 7 over and over and over in the book of Revelation, and it has a symbolic significance. Clearly, it can be literal. There are 7 churches that are addressed specifically in the book of Revelation. We talked about those at the beginning of the class. There are literally 7 churches, but those 7 churches have a symbolic meaning. So there's a mixing of the literal and the symbolic. So another way of viewing this is simply to understand that the 7 here is a symbolic reference to the totality of these emperors who have waged war, were waging war, and would yet wage war against the church. Now, what I mean by that is this. We've already seen in Roman history, this is what we see. In the early days of the church, I mean in the first century days, okay, there isn't a concerted effort by the Roman Empire to defeat Christianity. The truth of the matter is, at the beginning, the Romans think the Christians are just Jews. And so the Christians kind of get a bye because they're just kind of lumped into that group that had special standing anyways in the empire. Later, it's going to become clear to the Romans that this is a different group, and are they going to have the same exemptions the Jews did? And the answer was, by and large, no. So we have Nero persecuting Christians. He already recognizes them as a separate group, but he only does that in the city of Rome. It's not empire-wide. But he does persecute, but only in the city of Rome. Then we move through time, and the emperors that follow Nero until we get to Domitian aren't really all that interested in doing anything with the Christians. There isn't any state policy of persecution. Then we get the reign of Domitian. And in the reign of Domitian, we start to get persecution of Christians as state policy. And that's going to continue off and on for the next 200-odd years. Okay? There will be some emperors who will never care about persecuting Christians. But on the books, if you will, Christianity will remain an illegal religion. Okay? And Christianity, therefore, Christians, therefore, would always be subject to persecution. And so that's going to continue on until we get the reign of Constantine. And in 313 AD, he's going to declare, with the Edict of Toleration, he's going to declare that Christianity is no longer an illegal religion. But that's 200 years after the book of Revelation. So there are going to be a series of emperors that are going to wage war against the church, all right, to one degree or another. So that's possibly another explanation. I will tell you that I personally look at these 7 that you see on the screen. Where I am right now in my understanding of this text is that that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the totality, that Rome is standing in the current position of all of these previous nations, and yet all the future ones are there as well, because the book of Revelation is talking to Christians in the first century, dealing with a Roman persecution. But the ultimate message is to every Christian who's going to live after that to take courage that whatever nation comes against God's people is not going to succeed. Okay. Here's a question that was typed in the comments by Ben. If we look at the 7 kings as singular kingdoms, would we look at the 7th as one kingdom instead of all to come? We could, I suppose we could, Ben, look at it that way, that we have Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then some other kingdom that's still future. We would not know which one that is. Okay, so we would not know what kingdom is under view there, which in and of itself wouldn't be a problem for us not to know that, because there are certain things that we don't know from the scriptures. But personally, again, my personal view is that that's encompassing all the ones that from that time forward would yet come. And by the way, from a historical standpoint, from an earthly standpoint, there has never been the kind of persecution that Rome instituted against Christians. Christians have been persecuted. Christians are persecuted. We have brothers and sisters in Christ that live in certain countries of the world today, and because we're doing this on Facebook Live, I am not saying where they are, that face direct persecution at the hands of their government. That is still an ongoing thing. But none of that seems to have ever reached the level that the persecution that came from Rome did to the Christians in these first 2 centuries. So thank you for that question, Ben. I'm not sure if I helped you out there a little bit. If it would refer to one concrete, I'm not sure which that would be. I think it refers to all the kingdoms that are yet to come. But I think there's a lot of merit in understanding the 7 is symbolic as well. And so I'm not going to say I'm on the fence. If I am, I have fallen more on the fence of these 7 that are listed on the side. But who knows? In time, as I study this more, I may come to a different conclusion. Okay? So let's continue on, because we still got a little bit left, and I don't want us to run out of time. We shouldn't, because we don't have that much more left. All right. So the 7 heads, 7 mountains, 7 kings. Let's look on, talk about these a little bit more. So behind these, there is an 8th, and that 8 is the beast itself. Okay? So as for the beast, verse 11, that was and is not. It is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7th, and it goes to destruction. So the 8th, the beast himself, is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it's going to go to destruction. I understand this is very confusing, and when we look at that, we look at what I just put up there, you may say, well, that doesn't work at all with that. I grant that. Again, it's very hard sometimes to understand all the symbols that are going on in this chapter particularly, but we don't want to lose sight of the forest. We don't want to lose sight of the overall theme. Okay? We might disagree about what the 8th represents. We might disagree about the 7th, because there are so many different understandings of that text. I know that people do disagree about that. Even members of the Lord's Church have different interpretations of that. But we don't come out with a different overall interpretation at the end. Okay? So behind these is an 8, the beast himself. Again, if the beast represents the Roman Empire, it's hard to understand how he's behind that, except that the beast, the Roman Empire, who's behind the beast? Well, the dragon is behind the beast. And so maybe that's a way of understanding that and getting those two together. All right, we read then in verses 12 through 13 that we have the 10 horns here that equal 10 kings. And these 10 kings are going to reign with the beast for a short while. All right, so what is this about? Well, in the Roman Empire, you had the Roman emperor who controlled the empire as a whole, but Rome exercised its control in various parts of the empire through vassal kings that were under Rome's control. So, for example, in the opening chapters of the New Testament, we read of King Herod, king of the Jews. But King Herod wasn't an independent king, because they were very much firmly under Rome's control. Herod was a vassal king. He served as king because Rome allowed him to. And so what I would suggest to you is that as we see these 10 kings here, that's simply a reference to these vassal kings that are cooperating with Rome's control. And by the way, those kings, if Rome says persecute Christians, those kings are going to go right along with that and do that. They're not going to say, oh, no, that's not going to happen in our kingdom, in our part of the empire, because they know the answer to the emperor. Okay? So I think that's what we've got going on there with those 10 horns. All right, so there is war with the Lamb. Let's look at verse 14 again. Verse 14, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. So there is going to be war made on the Lamb, but the Lamb is victorious. Well, when we talk about the Lamb here, we've seen war against the Lamb. We've seen war against the church. Making war on the Lamb, making war on the church are one and the same. Basically, what God is saying is, if you pick on my people, you've picked on me. And if you've made war on my people, you've made war on me. But in the imagery here in chapter 17, the war is pictured as being directed against the Lamb. Now, we also read then in verses 16 and 17, something interesting here, that the beast and the kings hate the prostitute. Remember, the prostitute is Rome, the city. Okay? The 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. What is this referring to? Well, I think it's referencing discord and rebellion in the empire. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, isn't it? So you got Rome, the city. And Rome, the city, is kind of in the empire. It's the belly button of the world, if you will. All right. And so everybody, all roads lead to Rome. Rome is the great city. It's the center of culture. It's the center of government. It's the greatest city on earth. And it rules everybody else, and everybody else has to kowtow to it. It's a little bit like, and I do not want to insult any New Yorkers who are listening to this. Drew, if you're listening to this, please, I'm not insulting the city of New York. I am just making a statement. If you watch American television, you would think that New York City is the center of our country because so many shows are set in New York City. Very few shows are ever set in Dallas, Texas, but a lot of them are set in New York City. And so people who live in other parts of the world who watch American TV shows, they think that what they see on TV about New York is the way it is everywhere in the United States. And you know, it's kind of funny because a lot of people really don't care for New York City. And yet, a lot of people really want to go to New York City to watch the Broadway shows. So it's kind of a love-hate relationship with the city. It's kind of that way in the Roman Empire. You had a love-hate relationship with the city of Rome itself because the city of Rome itself kind of pictured itself as a goddess, for example, and pictured itself as really being the one who is, I'm chuckling because Drew just sent me a message, and I'm not going to read that out loud about New York City. But they pictured the city as a goddess. That kind of tells us how they elevated the city above all else. Well, other people resented that. Other parts of the empire resented that. And so we see this reference to discord and rebellion in the empire. All right, so what are we looking at here in chapter 17? We've kind of picked apart and looked at some of the trees in this. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of sum this up. What are we looking at? Well, in Revelation 17, what we have is the city of Rome and its empire, drunk with the blood of the saints of Christ. But 17 isn't the end of the story, because what's going to happen in the next chapter is going to tell us what's going to happen to this prostitute. Okay? So 17 and 18 are taken together. We need to remember that. But we have in chapter 17 this horribly ugly, wicked woman, the prostitute. She's the one that's making war on the Lamb. So I want you to think about this for just a moment. If you can kind of visualize this in your mind, and you're thinking, well, here we've got this prostitute on a scarlet beast on one side, and she's swaggering and swaying because she's drunk with blood. And then on the other side, we have this lamb. You look at those two characters, and if you see how they're depicted here in the book of Revelation, who are you rooting for? You're rooting for the Lamb. Because there's clearly a hero here and a villain. And the villain is the prostitute on the scarlet beast. All right, so for Sunday night. For Sunday night, I need you to read chapter 18. Read chapter 18, read the entire chapter, verses 1 through 24.